So today I will be demonstrating my implementation of a distributed database system for the CIT5641 distributed data management assignment. In this presentation, I will build a distributed database from scratch, implementing various fragmentation techniques across multiple database sites. I'll show each step of the process from setting up the environment to testing the final implementation. I had already done a separate implementation for my report, but for presentation purposes, I felt it would be best to kind of run through that process again. So the database schema we are working with for this assignment includes 5 relations. We have an employee relation, a department relation, a part relation, a stock relation, and a supplier relation. So before I start with describing my environment setup, I can just briefly talk about what a distributed database actually is. So a distributed database is a collection of multiple logically interrelated databases distributed over a computer network. Unlike a centralized database, the data is physically stored across multiple sites, but functions as a single logical database. So today we will be implementing four types of fragmentation. So firstly, we have horizontal fragmentation, which involves splitting a table or relation by rows, more like dividing a spreadsheet horizontally. And then we have derived horizontal fragmentation, which involves splitting a table based on conditions derived from another table. And thirdly, we have vertical fragmentation, which involves splitting a table by columns. Again, to give an example of the spreadsheet, this would be like dividing a spreadsheet vertically. And then lastly, we have hybrid fragmentation, which involves the combining of horizontal and vertical approaches. So with that being said, I can begin by setting up our distributed database environment. I will be using Oracle Express 21C with SQL Developer as my interface to create our distributed database environment. So I can start by walking through the setup process step by step. So the first thing that I had to do to connect to my database as a user, the first thing I had to do was to connect to my database as a user that has administrative privileges. So in this case, I am connecting as the system user. We can see the system user here under the connections tab. And I've already opened a connection and we have the worksheet here where we're going to type our queries. So this system user is going to be used to create the two schemas we're going to be working with. We're going to name them Oracle 01 and Oracle 02. So for the interest of time, some of the longer queries, I'll just copy them from a notepad that I had set up freehand, just so that we don't waste too much time typing in the queries. So I'll just copy these two queries here that we're going to use to create the two schemas. And when we run the script, we can see that the two schemas have been created successfully and the grants have been created successfully as well. So the next thing that we have to do from here is to create connections to the schemas that we created. So I'll just do that quickly. So we just maintain the same name here. Um, that's Oracle 01. And we can also use that for the username. And we type in a password. So for this implementation, I was using a pluggable database. So I just have to specify the service name here. And I'll just save the password so we can just test the connection. We can see it's successful and we can connect to Oracle 01. So we have a connection created here to the Oracle 01 schema that we had created. So we just have to repeat the same process for Oracle 02. Again, just specifying the service name. We can test the connection. We see that's successful, and we can proceed to connect to the Oracle 02 schema that we created. So now that we have created the two users or schemas with the um, with the necessary grants and privileges, we can now proceed to create connections to these users in SQL Developer. So what we're going to do next is to create database links, which are going to enable communication between these two schemas. Database links can be described as named objects that describe a path from one database to another. So again, for these two queries, I'm just going to copy from the notepad that I had created here. So we're going to connect as Oracle 01 to begin with, and then we're going to create a link from Oracle 01 to Oracle 02. So when we run that script, we can see that the link has been created successfully, and we can just copy that, connect as Oracle 02, and just replace this and make a connection from Oracle 02 to Oracle 01. So when we run the script again in Oracle 02, we can see that the database link to Oracle 01 has been created successfully. So to verify this connection, so the next thing that we have to do, just to make sure we don't end up facing any errors as we go along, is just to confirm that the links are working correctly by testing each one of them. So we're first going to test the link from Oracle 01 to Oracle 02. So we're going to go back here and connect as Oracle 01, and we're going to run the following query. And when we execute that query, we can see it returns one row here. And this shows that the connection from Oracle 01 to Oracle 02 is working as we require it. And we can do the same. We can connect to Oracle 02 here, and we can just replace that, make it Oracle 01. And when we run the query again, we should expect to see the same result, which we do. So yes, that confirms that both database links are functioning correctly. And this means our schemas can now communicate with each other, which is an essential part of a distributed database system. So next we are going to create our base tables in both schemas. So what we're going to do next is the creation of our base tables. So these tables are the employee table, the department table, the part table, stock table, and the supplier table. So I already have these creation queries set up. So I can just copy them, and we can start with Oracle 01. So once we run that script, we can see that our base tables have been created successfully. And when we go to the Oracle 01 connection, we go down to tables as well. Here we can see that the 5 tables we described have been created successfully. So we can just replicate that in Oracle 02 as well. We run the script and we can see the success message here. And when we connect to Oracle 02, we can see that the base tables have been created there as well. So the next thing we're going to do is to populate these base tables with some dummy data. So let me just copy that from copy that from the queries that I had set up. So again, we're going to start with Oracle 01, and we can see the insertion has been successful, and we can just confirm that in one of the tables, the department table over here. When you go to data, we can see that we have some data in that table, and we can do the same for employee here, for parts, for stock and supplier. So we're going to replicate that again in Oracle 02. We can just quickly confirm that the insertions worked, so we can see we have the same data in Oracle 02 as well. So now that we have created and populated the base tables, we can begin implementing the different fragmentation types that were specified for this assignment. So now we're going to move on to the fragmentation techniques. So we can start with horizontal fragmentation. And like I mentioned previously, this involves splitting a table or relation by rows. So according to the assignment, our company should consist of 3 subsidiaries with different department number ranges. So I can just open up the assignment here, just to confirm what the subsidiary ranges were. So for subsidiary 1, we had departments 100 to 220 and department 250. For subsidiary 2, we had the departments 221, the departments 370, but in this case we're excluding department 250, which is of course part of subsidiary 1. And then for subsidiary 3, we have the departments between 371 to 430. So okay, so we can begin implementing the fragmentation. So we're going to create subsidiary 1 in the Oracle 01 schema. So we're just going to write this query here. So we're going to name this department underscore subsidiary 1. And we're going to select from the department table that we created, and we're going to specify the ranges that were described. So we've got the department number there, and that was between 100 and 220, and we're going to also include department 250. So between 100 and 220, or department 250. And if we run the script, we can see that our subsidiary 1 has been created successfully. We can just confirm that under the tables tab. We can just refresh our connection there, and we can see that a department, the subsidiary 1 has been created successfully, and we can confirm that the department numbers we have here meet the criteria that we had described, which was departments between 100 and 250. Departments between 100 and 220, which all these 3 departments here fall under. And we're also including department 250. So we can verify this fragment in our worksheet here. We can just type a query real quick to select from the department that we have just created. We can just order by department number just so that our result set looks a bit organized. So when we run that query, we can see the exact same departments that we saw in the subsidiary 1 table. So what we're going to do next is we're going to create the 2 other subsidiaries in the second schema. So we're going to type in a similar query, and that's subsidiary 2. And again, we're selecting from the department table. So for this, if we go back to our assignment, so for subsidiary 2, we are required to have departments from 221 to 370, but we're not going to include department 250 because we already have that in subsidiary 1. So we can just type the condition there between 221 and 370, and we are not going to include department 250. Oh, okay. We can run that query there. We can just confirm in Oracle 02. Once we refresh, so you can see our subsidiary 2 has been created and it meets the criteria that we specified. So we've got the departments between 221 and 370, which both of these qualify under. And we're not including department 250, even though it's between our initial range, we had excluded it within the query. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to now create the third subsidiary. So I can just use the same query. This subsidiary is also going to be created in the second schema. So we can just quickly go back to the question here and confirm that we've got the correct range. So for this one, it was straightforward. It was simply departments between 371 and 430. So 371, 430, and here we're not excluding any departments. So, and we can just get rid of the parentheses as well. They won't be necessary here. We can just run that script. We can see that the department subsidiary has been created successfully. And we can see it here under the tables for Oracle 02. So that describes horizontal fragmentation of the department relation across our two schemas. So in a real distributed database, these fragments would be physically separated but function as a single logical table. What this approach does is that it improves performance by sorting data closer to where it is used. For example, subsidiary 1 primarily uses data about departments 100 to 220 and department 250. So this data is stored locally in the Oracle 01 schema. So the next thing we're going to do is to implement our second fragmentation technique. This one is called derived horizontal fragmentation. And this is one where a relation is fragmented based on conditions derived from another fragmentation. From another relation. So the first thing we're going to do is fragment the employee relation into managers and non-managers, which was what was described in the assignment over here. So this particular fragmentation is derived from the department relation where managers are identified by the manager employee number attribute. So we can just go to the department table over here. We can look at the data. And when we look at the columns, we can notice that we've got a column here that specifies which employees are managers of their particular departments. So if we go on the employee table, we can just take note of these manager employee numbers that we're seeing here, and we can see that we have them as well in the employee table. We've got these 7 managers over here. So what we're going to do to create this, so we can first start by creating the managers fragment. We will be doing that in Oracle 01. So I can just type the following query. So what we're going to do here is we're going to be selecting from the employee table, and we're going to create a join the department table, and we're going to join on the employee number from the employee table and the manager employee number from the department table. So this query over here should give us a list of, should create a fragment that contains the managers. So when we run that query, we can see that our fragment has been created successfully. And we can just go to Oracle 01 here. We can refresh. We open the tables there. And we can see that the employees that we see here are the ones that we saw in the the employee numbers that we see over here are the ones that we had seen in the department table under the manager employee number field. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create the non-managers fragment, and we're going to do this in Oracle 02. So we can just copy this query here. The first part is going to be the same, but instead of doing a join for this one, we're going to do a where clause. So we're going to be getting all the employees who are not managers of their departments. And to specify that, we are going to get where that manager employee number is not null. And when we run this query, um, we've got an error over here. Should just be a typo. Okay, I think it's here. We should be good when we run that. Oh, another error. We had to change the table name just for consistency. It had to be EMP2 and not EMP1. So let me just remove it from Oracle 02. So I'm just going to drop that table for now. And we're just going to specify this as EMP2. And when we run that, we can see that it has been created successfully. And when we go back to Oracle 02 here, we can confirm that the employee numbers that we are seeing here are what's supposed to be our non-managers. So again, if we compare that to what we have in the department table, we can see that none of the employee numbers that we saw in the non-managers fragment that we created are appearing here under the manager employee number. So for derived horizontal fragmentation, we also had a second section, and that involved splitting the part relation based on whether suppliers are internal or external. So in this case, internal suppliers are departments within the company, so their supplier numbers match the department numbers. So that was described in the question here. So if we look at the supplier table, we can see that we've got supplier numbers here, and we can see under supplier name we have the description here of internal. So we can also just confirm that these suppliers with these supplier numbers also exist within our department table. So we can see that was the research department, the development department, and the marketing department, I think. So it's 100, 150, and 200. Yes, so research department, development department, and marketing department. So the first thing we're going to do here is create an external parts fragment in Oracle 01. So we can just open the worksheet here and we can create our fragment for external parts. So what we're doing here is that we're selecting all parts where the supplier number is not part of our department table. So if we run the query here, we should see that we have created a fragment for external parts in Oracle 01. So we can just connect as Oracle 01 here. We can refresh and we can see that we've got a part external fragment that we have created over here. So what we're going to do now is that we're going to do a similar operation in Oracle 02 for our internal parts fragment. So we can just copy part of the query. So we're going to name this part internal. And this should remain the same. And what we're going to do is we're just going to remove this not clause here. And that should give us parts that were supplied by internal suppliers. Those are departments that exist within the organization. So when we run the script here, we're going to see that we have created a part internal table, and we can confirm that this table exists in Oracle 02. We just refresh our connection, we go to the tables, and we can see we've got a part internal fragment that we've created here. So this shows the two derived horizontal fragmentation techniques, one for employees and one for parts. So what this approach does is it makes business sense because managers and non-managers typically have different access patterns, and that's the same for parts from internal versus external suppliers. So now we can move on to vertical fragmentation. This involves splitting a relation by columns. So for the assignment, we were required to fragment the employee relation into three vertical fragments. We had, let me just confirm. So we had name and address, another fragment for department number, and the third fragment for name and salary. So we can just start implementing these vertical fragmentations now. So firstly, we're going to connect to Oracle 01, and we are going to create the first two fragments. So that's for name and address, and the second one for department number. So we can just create a table. We're going to call this employee underscore name underscore address. And we're going to select the employee number. We can also get the employee name because that's what we're looking for here. And the address from the employee table. So we can just also write the query for our second fragment in advance. So that's we're creating the department number fragment in this case. So we can call that employee underscore department, and we select the employee number for identification, and we select the department number that the employee belongs to. Okay, so when we run this script, you can see in the results here that we have successfully created our first two fragments. So what we can do now is we can connect as Oracle 02, and we can create the fragment for name and salary. So we're going to call this employee underscore name underscore salary. And again, we select the employee number for identification. We select the name because that's what the fragment requires, as well as selecting the salary. And of course, that's going to come from the employee table. So when we run this script, we can see that the employee name salary has been created. So quickly to verify this, we can just run a simple select query, and we can just order that by the employee number. Let's just see if we get the results we're looking for. So when we run that script, we can see that we've got a fragment here that contains the employee names as well as their salaries. So we can just do that confirmation for the other two fragments that we had created in Oracle 01. And again, we'll just order by employee number. We can just remove that, and we can run this as a script. And here you can see that we've got our first fragment, which no, let me just run these one by one. So here you can see that we've got our first fragment, which required us to have the employee name as well as address. And we've got our second fragment here, which required us to have the employee um, the employee number for identification as well as the department number. So these are the fragments that we have created. So what we can note here is that each fragment includes the primary key to enable reconstruction of the complete employee record. So the assignment also asked us to talk about the potential problems with this vertical fragmentation. So in this case, we have an issue of data redundancy because the employee name appears in both the employee name address fragment and the employee name salary fragment. So when we are collecting data, when we're retrieving data from this distributed data management solution, we might face some inconsistencies due to that employee name appearing in both the employee name fragment, the employee name address fragment and the employee name salary fragment. So another issue that we have is to do with join overhead. So reconstructing a complete employee record requires joins across multiple fragments, which can be expensive in a distributed environment that we're trying to implement. Another issue we might have is one of transaction management. So in this case, updates affecting multiple records, like for example, changing an employee's name, require distributed transaction coordination. So if that coordination is not there, we might face some issues when we're trying to update employee information. Another issue we face is one to do with schema evolution. So adding new attributes to the employee relation would require modifying multiple fragment definitions. But despite these challenges, vertical fragmentation can still be beneficial when different departments frequently access different attributes of the same relation. So lastly, we're going to look at hybrid fragmentation, which, as the name suggests, involves combining aspects of both horizontal fragmentation and vertical fragmentation. So for this fragmentation technique, the assignment required us to fragment the part relation first by price. So that had to be, I can remember well, cheap versus expensive. So Yes, so cheap versus expensive, and then further fragmenting expensive parts by supplier type. So to achieve this, we can first start by connecting as Oracle 01, and we're going to create a table. We can name that parts underscore cheap. And we're going to select in the parts table where the price is less than 1,000. So we can run that script, and you can see here that we have successfully created our cheap parts fragment. So what we're going to do next is we're going to connect as Oracle 02, and we are going to create a fragment for expensive internal parts. So we can just create the table there. We can name it parts underscore expensive underscore internal. And we're going to select all from the part table where the price of the part is greater than 1,000, because these are what we are considering our expensive parts. And the supplier number is one of our departments from the department table. So that's going to be our fragment for expensive internal parts. So if we run the script, we can see that the fragment has been created successfully. So what we're going to do after this is we're going to create a fragment for expensive external parts. So the query is going to be similar. We just have to change a few things. So we're going to name this parts underscore expensive underscore external. And then we're just going to add a not clause here so that we are focusing on the suppliers that are not part of our departments, which makes them external suppliers. So once we create this fragment, we can see it has also been created successfully. So we can just confirm that these fragments we have created actually exist. So we can start by the cheap parts fragment that we had created. So we can select from cheap parts, and we can order by the part number. Oh, again, I'm missing the by keyword here. Um, so when we run that, we can see that we have our cheap parts here, and we say they should be below the price of 1,000, and we can see that all the parts here actually adhere to that criteria. So we can just do the confirmation as well in Oracle 02 for the two fragments that we had created for expensive parts. So we can select from, I think that was parts. Okay, that was parts. Parts. We can start with parts expensive internal, and we can order by part number. And when we run this, we should see we saw what we get here are parts that are expensive, so the price is above 1,000, as we can see here. But and parts that are expensive and that have suppliers that exist within the organization. So if we check for these two supplier numbers in our departments table, so we can take note of them, 100 and 150, we should be able to see them in our department table over here. So that's the research department and the development department. So we can just do the same for the external parts. And if we run that, so what we're getting here are expensive parts. but the supplier in this case exists outside of our organization. So if we look at this supply number and we go to our department table, we can see that we don't have the supplier, we don't have the department number for 501. So that means that this supplier came from outside of the organization. So that's how I have implemented hybrid fragmentation for the part relation. And what this approach does is that it offers flexibility in addressing complex business requirements, such as different approval workflows for expensive parts from internal versus external suppliers. So for the final part of the recording, I'm just going to quickly peruse through creating unified access views as well as implementing data manipulation procedures. So for the interest of time, we're not going to spend too much time typing in the queries for this section. I'm just going to copy them from the previous implementation that I had done for the report. So the first thing we are going to do, or rather, let me just maybe highlight the importance of this. So now that we've fragmented our data across multiple schemas, what we need to do now is to provide unified access so that applications can interact with the distributed database as if it were a single logical database. So what we're going to do is we're going to create views that integrate data across fragments, providing location transparency to users and applications. So we'll first start by connecting as Oracle 01, and we are going to create the following views. So that's going to be three views, one for the employee relation, one for the part relation, and one for the department relation. So we can just run this script and we can see that our views have been created successfully. And to verify that, or to test the views that we've created, we can just quickly run some simple select statements over here. So we're going to be selecting from the department view, and we're going to order by the department number just to keep things organized. And when we run that, we can see that we have all the departments that we had created from the department table here in the department view. So we can do the same for the employee view that we had created. In this case, we're going to be ordering by employee number. And as you can see, we've got all the employees here. And if we do the same for the part view that we created, should be part underscore O. And we're going to be ordering by the part number. You can see that we have all the parts that we had created from our part table. So we're going to connect as Oracle 02, and we are going to create similar views here. One for the department relation, one for the employee relation, and another one for the part relation. So we can just get our queries here, and we run the script. We can see that the views have been created successfully. Okay. And we can quickly just confirm. We can start with the part view. We can see we're able to retrieve the parts. We can move to the employee view, employee number here, and you can see that we are able to see the employees. And then we can move to the department view, order by department number, and you can see that we're able to see all the departments that we created again. So what these views do is that they provide what's called location transparency. meaning that applications don't need to know where the data is physically stored. For horizontal and hybrid fragmentation, I've used union or to combine fragments, and for vertical fragmentation, we would use joins to reconstruct the complete records. So the last thing we're going to look at is implementing data manipulation procedures. So the reason we're doing this is because one of the challenges in a distributed database is maintaining consistency when manipulating data across fragments. So what we're going to do now is we're going to create stored procedures to handle insertions, updates, and deletions across fragments. So maybe for the interest of time, we'll just look at insertions and deletions. So we can start with a procedure that I wrote to create a new employee. So I can just copy that from my notepad here. So we're going to create this procedure within Oracle 01. So if I run the script, we can see that the procedure to insert an employee has been compiled. We can also add a procedure to delete an employee. And that procedure has also been compiled successfully. And then we can also just add one more for creation of a part. So what these procedures do is that they encapsulate the complexity of fragmentation of the fragmentation scheme, providing a clean interface for applications to interact with the distributed database. They ensure that operations affecting multiple fragments are performed as single atomic transactions, maintaining data consistency. So we can just do a bit of testing. So we had created the insert employee procedure here. So to start this procedure, we use the keyword begin, and we're going to say insert underscore employee. And once we've started the procedure, we're supposed to end it as well. So I can just put some data here. So I can just put an employee number. Can use my name there. Can put a salary. And when we run this script, we can see down here that the procedure has been successfully completed. So what we can do now is that we can verify that the insertion was successful across the various fragments that we have created. So we can start with the employee name address fragment that we had created under the earlier in the assignment. So we can select from employee name address where the employee number is equals to 3001. And when we run that, we can see that Oh, I got the spelling wrong for the address, but that's fine. When we run that query, we can see that the employee that we had added actually exists within the employee name address fragment that we had created. So we can also check the employee department fragment that we created. Yeah, no, I think it was like this actually. And when we run that, again, we should be able to see that the employee number exists within the department number that we had specified. We can also do the same for the employee. We can also do the same for the employee name salary. So something that I maybe did not describe earlier is that even when we're connected to Oracle 01, we can still access fragments from Oracle 02. And that was why we did the linking at the beginning of the assignment. So instead of having to go and connect as Oracle 02, I can just do at Oracle 02 underscore link, I think is what we named it. And this should be able to give us an indication that the employee that we had created exists within the fragment in Oracle 02 for name and salary. So when we run that script, we can see that the employee record that we created does indeed exist within the employee name salary fragment in Oracle 02. So we can also, because this employee who we added, we did not make an entry for them in the department table to specify that they are a manager. So this employee would be considered a non-manager. So if we select from the non-managers fragment that we had created in Oracle 02, we will see that we're going to get a record that's going to be returned showing the employee that we had added. So if we change this to the managers fragment, just to show an example here, when we run that, we will see that we don't have any records returned because the employee that we had created is not a manager. So if you recall, we had created a procedure to delete an employee record as well. So we can just test to see that that works. So we had named it delete underscore employee. And all we have to do here is to specify the employee number, and we can end the procedure. When we run the script, we can see that the procedure has been successfully completed. And if we try to run any of the previous select queries, we will notice that this time around, we actually have no record returned because that employee has been deleted. So I think this brings us to the end of the presentation. And to conclude, what we did was that we successfully implemented a distributed database system that uses horizontal fragmentation to distribute department data by subsidiary, applied derived horizontal fragmentation to separate managers from non-managers and internal from external parts, and also employed vertical fragmentation to distribute employee data by attribute type, and finally implemented hybrid fragmentation to manage parts based on price and supplier type. Through the use of views and stored procedures, which we implemented, we provided transparent access to the fragmented data while maintaining consistency across the distributed environment. The key benefits of this distributed approach include, like we had discussed previously, improved performance because data is stored closer to where it is used, and this would in turn reduce network traffic and improve response times. And we've also got enhanced availability because if one site fails, only the fragments at the site become unavailable. We've also got local autonomy because each site has control over its local data. And we've also got scalability because the system can grow by adding one or more sites to handle any form of increased load. So this implementation demonstrates how distributed database concepts can be applied to meet specific business objectives, improving performance and availability while also providing a unified interface to applications and to users. Thank you for your attention, and that brings us to the end.